On our morning show today, we have State Senator Sarah Keyeski of the 14th Senate District in the studios to talk about all the goings on and some recent things that she's been working on. Just really good to see you again, Sarah.
Oh, thanks so much, Phil. Similarly, delighted to see you.
Great. You've been busy. I know a couple of bills that you've been working steady on have recently made the news.
Yeah, no, we've been very busy. It's kind of what they call silly season, I guess. This is what I've learned, and so it's just like a blast of all kinds of movement in committees and with bills, and trying to get some passed by the end of the session. Crossing my fingers that we'll make some movement, but we'll see.
Right. All you can do is try, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Grow Your Own grant program that you've been working on. Really concerned about teachers and getting good teachers in the future, right?
Yeah. So, as we have seen, unfortunately, the teaching profession has seen a lot of burnout. And people recognize, unfortunately, that we don't pay that well for our teachers despite the demands of the job. And so we are trying to think about ways that we can enhance the likelihood people might want to participate in the profession. And so we are doing a couple of things. We are looking at legislation that could pay during someone's student teaching period of time, because that they need to do that in order to be licensed. But the problem is oftentimes that's unpaid, and that's very, very difficult to do for months at a time when you're just coming out of school and you have all those loans already, and you're then dedicating this time. So it's one of the ideas that we have coming forward, and hopefully it will resonate with both sides of the aisle. We have strong Democratic support for it, obviously, but so far it has not garnered much from the other side.
And I think that's very important because, not only we want to build good teachers, we want to keep teachers, and so important for our future, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sadly been a villainization of teachers, and I don't quite understand that because I don't know about you, but like I revered my teachers when I was younger. And on top of that, I've been a substitute teacher. Now it's been a number of years ago, but the people in our schools that are really working with such dedication to enrich the lives of our students with more knowledge, more critical thinking skills, I think it's a beautiful profession, and for them to be mistreated in the way that has happened with this cultural backlash that has somehow been targeted at teachers, I think is just such a shame. And I don't blame them for feeling reluctant to join the profession. But I know many wish they could if a couple of things. One is if people respected the profession again, and if they were paid in such a way that it was a maintainable profession that could pay their bills and make sure that they had a decent quality of life.
How do you see that getting respect back for the profession? What would be some ways?
I think that's a really good question. One of the things that I wish is that people would spend more time in our schools. When I was a substitute teacher, I was a substitute teacher for a couple of years back in about 2016, 17, 18, somewhere in there. And I did that because I was only working part-time at the time as a mental health provider, and my kids had gotten old enough that they were in school. And so I thought that was a nice opportunity to kind of have a say over my schedule. Which days could I volunteer doing other things that I was passionate about, but what days could I maybe work and help because there was such a shortage of substitute teachers. So I did that then. And from my history of substitute teaching when back in the 80s, I remember them coming in. They would push in a cart with a TV on top, and they would put in a
video
DVD.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought, I kind of thought it would be kind of easy, to be honest with you. I was very naive. And instead, substitute teachers are still required to teach the lessons of the day because they just don't have room in the schedule to have kind of off days, if you will, where there's maybe less teaching happening, where you can kind of just have an easier schedule. I mean, they have a very rigorous schedule. And so I was teaching lessons, literal lessons, right? And I was seeing what was happening in the schools. I was seeing what other teachers were doing. I was seeing how the paraprofessionals were helping. I was seeing all of that in such a way that I didn't have any clue about. I saw some of the challenges with behaviors. I saw some of the challenges with individuals that had IEPs or individualized education plans and needed special education helpers. And I was astounded by the demands that our teachers have. And I would try to put that in the context of how they now have kind of taken this arrow of disdain, saying that they are trying to indoctrinate our kids and such like that. I think go in the schools, view them, participate, become a tutor, become a helper, you volunteer. They're not shutting the doors to people helping. They are opening the doors wide because they have nothing to hide. And so a lot of this is propaganda, and it isn't accurate. And so what we can say is, where do you get your facts? Because it's not factual. It is made up mostly, and it is fear-based. And that's really unfortunate that really good people are getting villainized in a way that they do not deserve, and that has created a toxic environment that they might not want to continue as teachers when we desperately need them.
And that takes us back to school funding. I think we talk about that every time you're in here, but anything new down the pike or anything that you've seen, Senator Keyeski?
Well, it's frustrating because in our most recent budget that was negotiated between the Republicans and the governor, there was no general school aid increase, inflationary increase. So there was a zero there as far as meeting any kind of inflationary needs for the general school fund. What they were willing to do is increase special ed reimbursement. So special ed students, they just need more services, which then cost more money. And that's not their fault. And our schools are mandated to provide a free and good education to all students. And so they need to meet those needs for those students too. So what happened is there was an increase in the reimbursement of those special ed services. Instead of having it all come out of, or most of it come out of general school funding and taking from the pot for everyone, they allowed an increase to 42% in the first year of the biennial budget and 45% in the second year of the biennial budget. Unfortunately, that agreement was some certain based on estimates of what they thought it would cost, and it was not some sufficient, which means it will meet that number wherever it is, because it's hard to calculate and to know what it will be like until you get the numbers, right? So they agreed some certain. Unfortunately, what we found is because of inflation, the some certain amount up until March of this year only meets 35% of those special ed reimbursement costs. 35%. So what we had presented and tried to get as Democrats, that was a big push we had. We're not even getting that. And it's heartbreaking for the schools because they were counting on it. And we had, hoped and prayed and promised that we are working really hard to give you that, and then this is what's happened. So what we've done as Democrats is we've put forth a bill to ask for the coverage of that amount that is not being covered now because of the underestimate and the extra costs because of inflation. That bill is in the Education Committee. I am in the Education Committee, and it has not gotten a hearing. So I fear that the Republicans, because they are in charge right now, they decide what bills get heard, they decide what bills get voted on, that they might not care. That this is really going to hurt our schools when we as a state have a budget surplus that can be used for this. My fear is they're going to let it exist like this without a solution that is available. We have a couple more months to see if they're willing to do something, and I'm really hopeful they will, and I hope people encourage them to do that.
I think that would go a long ways, because then schools could use that money maybe for something else that they need. If you can reimburse for the special education, the full amount, the money that they would have spent there, they can use for another something else, right?
Well, exactly. Like you have to pay for the special ed services. That's non-negotiable. Like that, because it's mandated in our Constitution to provide this education, it's not an option to provide those services or not. So they have to pay it. But where they have to get that money then from is the general purpose money, the general school money that comes from the state and property taxes. And so, unfortunately, if we don't provide that through our legislation, it comes from that general fund. And then other things don't get paid or have to end, right? So that can be all kinds of things. It could be maybe different. They might have to change something with food. They might have to change bus routes. They might have to change school personnel. They might have to change the things that go into just operating the school will have to be looked at or decreased somehow, likely to make up the amount that they have to pay for this.
Recently, Sarah, you were in Richland Center for a listening session on the 29th of January. Anything that came out of that? What was the common theme?
Oh gosh, it was great. First of all, I wasn't sure, how it's a small town. It's an evening. It's winter, right? But we had a great turnout, which was really wonderful. People in Richland Center are really invested in our democracy, in their community, and shared their concerns about things like affordability, healthcare. Some people talked about their concerns about ICE, the fears of that coming locally and what that might do for those that are maybe either undocumented or even documented but have brown skin that are being detained. And so we talked about all of those things to the extent that we could. We talked about education funding, property taxes. We talked about the budget surplus, what's happening with that. So there were a lot of really, really good questions. And I did my best to answer what I could about those presenting issues. And obviously we'll follow up with some of them about things that they brought up that I maybe need to look into a little bit more, like something about crops, if there's any kind of grant funding that could be available for changing crops from soybean and corn to maybe crops of another type. What are we doing that to encourage diversification, that kind of thing. And so it was a great conversation. It lasted over 2 hours and very engaged.
Indeed. And I'm sure that you learn from that. They're listening sessions, so you're kind of hearing what the people say and, kind of taking that back to Madison then, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, it's always interesting to go to different areas and hear the prevailing concerns of people. I think there's some, themes, no matter where I go. But I think it's interesting to come to a very informed group that is of all political persuasions, I could tell based on the questions there, and to be able to present thoughts and things that we're doing on my Democratic side in the legislature to try to address some of these issues very proactively.
WISI is back on the air. I saw that in the news. Are you happy to see that?
Yeah. So WIS-I, to be honest, before I got into politics, I didn't even know about WIS-I. That's the truth. And so, but what WIS-I is, for those that maybe don't know, it is the televised proceedings of our session dates, where we're all in session and voting on bills and debating them, etc., and committee hearings, many of the committee hearings. And so people, for free, can have an account and just watch and see what happens. And they can follow the progression of bills. They can follow the arguments about them. They can follow the voting about it. And so that's really important for transparent government. And because of funding issues and such, it went dark in December. And a lot of people were really concerned about that, including me. I believe in transparency. And I think that's fundamental for a healthy democracy. So I was happy to hear that we have a plan for February, but right now it's just February to fund them. And we are working in both chambers to try to figure out with our Republican colleagues what we might be able to do in order to kind of stabilize this entity, so that it can continue into many, many years into the future in a solid way.
I know that data centers have come up. In fact, we talked about them on the program not too long ago, about the possibility of coming to more of the rural areas. What's your take on it?
Yeah, so data centers, that was another question that came up in the listening session the other night. And I had a listening session yesterday in Portage, and it came up there because people are really interested, confused, curious about what's happening, because it's coming fast and furious to the state, where there are big billion-dollar companies that are seeking generally farmland to build big data centers. And they're happening all over Wisconsin. So there's real questions that have been brought to the surface now that people are more aware. They're worried about the environment, the impact on our water supply, for example. They're worried about utility rates. How is that going to affect us? Because the demands for utility are so high. They're interested in, how does it help a community? Where does the money go? Because there will be construction, and when there's new construction, that is more of a tax base for our local municipalities, which is a positive. There is concern about jobs. How many jobs will be coming? How many will be sustainable? Will it be through union workers or not? That kind of thing. So there's many pros and cons that are really trying to be understood by a number of people. And I think they're all really good questions that it's difficult to fully know the answers, because so much is new. But what we tried to do in the legislature, again, as Democrats, a number of months ago, we put forward a bill to try to help more with transparency about what our expectations are for data centers coming in. What are some guardrails for them? Where are we putting some limits as far as water usage? Can we do that? Or at least reporting? Where would we put the cap on how much or where their pricing would be for their own utilization of our energy through our energy infrastructure? And so that bill, unfortunately, too, has not gotten a hearing. And so it's unfortunate, because, what I wish I could say to people is we are putting guardrails in place. Right now, for whatever reason, the Republicans have not listened to that bill. They have recently put forward their own bill, but there's some challenges with that bill. One is that they want all energy generation to be on site, which is quite difficult, especially if you're going to have any kind of renewable energy. That's a pretty difficult thing to do, and it makes it almost impossible. so then we might be looking at less clean energy sources. It's kind of confusing. So we're kind of trying to figure out how do we go forward with some legislation so that people can at least feel like the government is their state government is working to be thoughtful and proactive about the guardrails for these extremely rich companies as they come in, so we can protect our environment and our citizens. And so I'm not sure where that's going to go the rest of the session since it's close to being done. But there have been a lot of people that have reached out with concerns about it that we've been trying to, to address.
It sounds like it's inevitable. They're going to exist. We're going to have them in our world in the future here and that kind of thing. But it's just a matter of trying to do it right?
Yeah, I believe there are already, on a smaller scale, some 50 that are already in the state of Wisconsin. So it's not necessarily fully about like unwillingness to have data centers. It's really about the size and the scale and the usage of energy and the usage of water. It's really more that and the impact of how much farmland will be taken up, et cetera. It's really trying to figure out what the impact on people and our environment are going to be and how to make sure that that is safe and thought through.
How is the legislative session going, from your perspective? How are things as of late?
It's interesting. I haven't been through this before where, it's sort of like fast and furious, like I said. I feel frustrated, I guess, to be honest. Right now, so this up until I think December, I have numbers from December. There were 408 democratically led bills that were presented to the legislature, and so people could work on co-sponsoring. And of course, not all of those probably should get a hearing. They're not all good, just like no, full array of Republican bills are probably perfect and good. But of the 408 bills that we have written and presented, including me, I've had some good ones, I believe, like right to repair. I had one about preventing hedge funds from purchasing single-family homes. We have some capping the cost of insulin. I mean, there's a number that are good out there. But of those 408, again, and those are up until December, there's still been more. Only 9 of those got a hearing. 3 got a vote out of committee, and exactly 0 democratically led bills, authored bills, got a vote on the floor. 0. That is not democracy to me. That's been very disheartening. What I've heard from my colleagues that have been here for a long time is it's worse than it's ever been. The partisanship. And quite frankly, I'm disgusted by it. I'm disgusted by it.
Yeah. That's, I think, what turns people off with politics lots of times is the fact that, nothing seems to get done. Everybody's spinning their wheels, right?
But it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. It is a decision, right? By each political party and each person in each political party, right? So the fact that this has happened, I believe, belongs right on every single Republican in elected office in Wisconsin today, because I do not see them asking for more democracy. I don't see them, going out to your radio show saying, I think this is inappropriate, that 0 Democratic bills have gotten a hearing. I don't hear them asking for it to be better. And so if you're not asking for it to better, you're condoning it happening. And I find that despicable, because if we are a purple state, then there's no reason that you can't recognize that there are good bills coming forward from Democrats. And some even have had some bipartisan support. It's limited, but nonetheless, some. Why can't those be heard? At least have a hearing. At least give them the allowance to have people share their thoughts about this. If it's terrible, fine, then don't vote for it, but give it a vote. Stand up for what you believe in. Show your constituents what you don't like, and then be held accountable. What happens is they don't have to take a no vote then, right? And say, oh no, I voted not for, let's say the hedge funds. Oh, instead they just don't even put it to the floor. So they don't have to say anything. I think that's absurd. And then they go onto their election campaigns, and then they can not have to speak to that because it didn't even happen. And I didn't know that's how it was, and I just find it so horrible. And I have said, I think if when Democrats get the majority, I plead and have had assurances that we will not do that, because I don't want to be part of it. I think it's dysfunctional. I think it's unethical. I think it's unfair for the citizens of Wisconsin. I have voted for plenty of Republican bills, because those are the bills that we get to hear, and those are the ones we vote on. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I have voted yes on many of them, because some of them are good, right? And so to think that you just don't even hear any Democratic bills, I think, again, it just gets me fired up. It makes me so frustrated, and I see why people are frustrated by politics, but it doesn't have to be this way. It is a choice, and I think every single Republican that is in elected office right now bears responsibility for how bad this is.
Is there anything that is right now you're agreeing with? I mean, anything going down the pike that's...
We are working on a cannabis bill, or hemp bill, and we're working on that one because there's real concerns about... There's some federal changes that are happening. It gets kind of convoluted, but we don't want it to hurt our hemp farmers. We don't want it to hurt our retailers, but we want more controls on these hemp-derived products, because there are some bad actors out there where we don't have regulation on potency. We don't have age restrictions. And so we have a lot of these shops that are open. It's a big business, but it's kind of wild, wild west, and it's scary. So trying to be thoughtful about how do we provide some, again, regulations in that world, so that we do right by those consumers that want that product, but also provide safety. So we're working on that one. Unfortunately, that one's an interesting one, because there's a Republican bill in the Senate that I'm, hoping to work with to make better, but there's a different Republican bill in the Assembly. So they don't agree, the two Republican leaders of those bills or authors. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope it does not die, because if it does, it's going to be very, very bad for many individual small businesses and others. So that's one. The other one that's a big one that we're trying to work on is the Knowles Nelson funding. And that has really hit a snag also. It is imperative, I believe, that we continue to fund the Knowles Nelson project, so that we maintain our parks and our bridges and our walking bridges, that kind of thing, our boat landings, the things that they work to protect and to develop and preserve. And right now, I'm not sure it's going to get passed, and that program might go dark, which would be just such a shame, because that has historically been a bipartisan program. And now we seem to have very strong differences of opinion, as Democrats really want that program to continue, and there's a lot of pushback against it by the Republicans. And I'm not trying to be so negative about, I wish I wasn't saying these partisan things. I'm just telling you how it is. I wish I could say, oh my gosh, we agree so deeply and we're getting along. And but these are the truth. You can look, follow the bills, look at who's signing on, watch the hearings. What I'm telling you is the truth. And it's a really sad truth, but it needs to be told, because this is what's happening. And unfortunately, it is very partisan right now.
Getting back to the cannabis bill, too, that was in the news this last week. So it sounds like some Republicans are for the legalization of medical marijuana. I've heard that
Yep.
some are.
Yep.
Where does it stand right now in the state?
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed with regard to marijuana. So we have this hemp issue and hemp derived products. We have the marijuana issue. We have medical marijuana, recreational marijuana. So there's a lot of pieces here. Some people want nothing, right? And I don't partake in the product, so I personally don't have a real strong feeling, except for the fact that I know many people benefit from them from a medicinal perspective, for example. And they're already here. And they come in from a lot of outside sources from the state. And so we really need to figure out what we're going to do as a state and not just put our head in the sand, but really have some really thoughtful legislation to address medical, to address recreational if we do it, and to address hemp-derived products.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good. I didn't. And you mentioned something federally. Isn't there something down the pike that could change the law? I want to say by July for
November.
Hemp? Oh, November.
November.
Okay.
Yeah. They've redefined hemp, and so it means it will be illegal, federally illegal, unless we put something in our state statutes, in our rules, to make it something that is legal, again, in a safe way, hopefully. And that's what we're working on. It's very convoluted, and to be honest with you, it makes my head spin, but
Yes.
we're working on it.
Yes. I know when you leave here, you're going to be involved in a Farmer Angel Network thing, and that's something that's near and dear to you, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I come from a farming family, grew up on a dairy farm, and I have a background and continued work in the field of mental health as a therapist. And the Farmers Angel Network is really working to be a resource for people in the agricultural world that are suffering with the challenges of being in that industry right now, because they have not only tariff concerns, they have climate concerns, they have market concerns, they have trade, and anyway, it was a hard, backbreaking work to be in farming, and so there's a lot of unfortunate despair, and the numbers of suicides in farmers has increased, and so it's trying to figure out how do we best support this really vital, hardworking, beautifully stabilizing infrastructure to our state of Wisconsin in a way that's thoughtful and provides support, because it's also a very isolating career in many ways. And so I'm excited to go to this luncheon and support what they're doing, and do whatever I can to be forward facing as somebody that believes in what they're doing.
And your background, that you have in terms of mental health and education and things like that. Trying times, right now. Obviously, a lot of people are going through some tough stuff.
Yeah. I've got to say, being a therapist, COVID was a hard time. This is harder. The people that are coming into my office are very heavy-hearted, with a lot of despair and distress, economically and societally. I think there's a lot of fear and concern and despair about what we're seeing happening to other people. Those of us that have this compassion for other people, outside of ourselves, not necessarily just individually oriented. And most of us are not just individually oriented. We understand and we recognize the beauty of being in society and the collective good. And when you have that perspective, it hurts. It's painful to watch people that are objecting to what ICE is doing, or at least just videotaping it, being manhandled and killed, for example. And all of a sudden the fear is really resonating in everybody in a new way, which is really sad, and yet I think informed, that no longer does your whiteness protect you. And that is, I think, making many people more aware of kind of where we're at in our country right now, and how these dangers, or the idea of, maybe we're not going to have state-run elections, and that's going to be nationalized, or now we're going to have, armed guards at these. People are really frightened about our democracy and what's happened to empathy and compassion and the rule of law. And so it's interesting, because while I'm in politics, it is so prominent in everybody that comes into my office right now. There's hardly a soul that comes in without something related to what's happening at the federal government level that's impacting them. Either it's maybe losing a job because they're in, some kind of field that has been abolished by the federal government. And so it's just heavy. It's heavy work right now. And I feel really, so I guess I will say every day is a lot. And yet, if I'm not there to help and to try to provide some hope that people like me are out there fighting for it to be better, I think that, oddly, I didn't realize this, but becoming a therapist that's also a state senator is kind of funny, because then they say, so what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm trying these things or whatever. And I try to give them a little bit so that they know that people are fighting for them, because otherwise it feels really, really scary. And so, maybe that gives a little bit of hope too.
Indeed. Ending on a positive note, has it been rewarding, your last year or so in office?
Oh my gosh. That is a great question. Somebody asked me the other day, like, kind of, I feel so bad. It seems so hard, whatever. And I said, but it fits me. It fits me. I think I am somebody that is committed to contributing as just a citizen. And so this is the best way as a public servant I can commit. I think it gives me an opportunity to really advocate for things that I believe in, that are good for people and caring and compassionate, as far as the needs for all people really across the state. I think there's a level of, I don't know, I guess activation that I have, because I don't like seeing things that I think are unfair or cruel. And so it just fires me up. And so I don't get diminished by the fight. I get invigorated by the fight, because I'm willing to fight very hard for the things I believe in. And I think that, oddly, this is a job that I'm fit for at this time, and I rather love it.
Yeah, well, thanks for what you do. We always appreciate when you stop and see us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Safe travels to you, because I know you cover a lot of miles.
Yes,
so.
I do. My car has seen so many. Yes, but thank you.
Senator Sarah Keyeski joining us for this report here on WRCO's Morning Show.